If you had to make a decision, a serious decision, and you're the only one that stand your ground, and everybody thinks what you about to do is wrong, will you change your mind? Welcome back to my channel. You know, a lot of things going on the news. We had several serious incident involving situation that's going on in Memphis, and I feel a lot for the mother and the father involved, because you know, when you're parents, it hits you hard. And I was just thinking about some things that when I was working in the prison system, and what I want to present to you for new nurses who may think that that's something they want to try, you know, because not everybody will be able to work in the prison. So stay tuned. We're going to talk Nurse Working in Prison Part 4. Correctional Nurse Assessment. You need to know your role as a correctional nurse, a prison nurse, a jail nurse, a detention nurse, whatever they call you. But if you happen to, there's various sectors in the correctional system that you can work. If you happen to be the RN in intake, and this is very, very important. I don't think I mentioned it before. A lot of inmates come in, and I remember one day, talk about correctional assessment, if you work in the intake and center or working with the kids. So this was in the prison system, and they put me in intake. Intake is when the new inmates come in, they book them and, you know, process, fingerprint, you see it on the TV. And depending on what happened, they need the nurse there because they come in and they get their medical screen. So this particular day I'm working, I think it was night shift, so you know how I am with nights. And I heard my name on the speaker, so apparently the sergeant wanted me to come to intake ASAP. So I went to intake, which is not nothing unusual. It has something to do with the inmate. So I thought maybe they had a seizure or something like that. So I knew you have emergency kit, emergency bags. It could be in a backpack. We don't have nothing rolling. So it's something light that you can carry because you have to carry it to the pod. So I take my emergency kit and I go to intake, which is not far. It's just around the corner. But you always want to be prepared because you don't know what's, you know, inmate coming in, they're drunk, and they might be going through withdrawal, all sort of stuff. So I go in there, and the police officer in the street, bring in the inmates. And this particular inmate, looked like he was beaten up, to be honest. His face was swollen. It seems like when I touched his arm, it was hurting, like it felt like it was fractured. And they wanted me to sign off on it, to admit, meaning if I signed off, I admit the patient into the facility. And I said, no, officer, you need to take this patient out. I am not accepting the inmate. I didn't say inmate because I try not to. I said, I'm not accepting this patient. You need to send him out, go to the hospital and bring back a medical clearance. And that's something that you need to know, nurses, and you need to stand up and say it, because You might feel like because they're officers, the police officer or the correctional officer, because apparently he came in and bypassed. So they say, oh, the correctional officer, let me get the charge nurse or the RN and she'll just sign it off. Not on my watch. I'm not taking that patient, because if you take that patient and he might have some kind of internal bleeding, first of all, I usually ask, but I know the inmate is so scared, he's not going to tell you to accept the patient. So I said, you know what, to not my supervisor, because you're the supervisor, really, if you're the only RN in the building. So I told the sergeant, I'm not going to accept him. I cannot sign. And one thing about in the prison system, they make good records. So they got your name. What's your name? Miss Foster. They write that down. Time she refused him, send him out. So the sergeant must have called. They go up the chain, they tell their boss, and they come back at me. I said, no, I'm not accepting it. I'm not putting my signature on that paper that you present to me. I want this inmate to go out to the hospital and get medical clearance before he comes in here. And the officers, they'll get mad and ask me. The officer know the rule. They know that they should go to the hospital and get the medical clearance. They know it, but they was trying to bypass whatever they trying to bypass. Because when I ask them, the officers, what happened, they don't be telling you what happened now. So, and also, it's a change of shift for them. And so they want to go home. And now, if we send him back, the officer has to sit with him at the hospital. Now, if they didn't send me here, if they didn't call for me and the officer dropped him off, see, the police officer don't want the nurse to come because they know the nurse going to say no. Well, if they have me, they didn't want me to come because they know I was going to say send him back. But just in case they slip through the door, the sergeant now has to find an officer, correctional officer, to go with the patient to the hospital. So either way, that patient was going out that night for me. Oh, why we gotta, how they act sometime. My thing is, why couldn't you go to the hospital? You gonna get him in here, and if you're the type of nurse not knowing, so say for instance you admit the patient, passed through, gone on the into population, something happened, he went to sleep and never wake up. It is your responsibility. It's gonna fall back on you, because what they'll say, you signed off, you admit the patient, it was your decision. So you have to stand your ground. You have to see the problem. I mean, I don't know if he had a fracture arm. I just assess it based on my eyes and a few questions. And when I touched him, the patient, and try to talk to him, he opened one eye. It was just a mess. It was heart-wrenching. And so for me to accept this patient, not me. Nada. And so, even if sometimes it goes up to the warden, and I will stand my ground on it. I'm protecting my license. You're not going to say Miss Foster gave you Tylenol. You're not going to say Miss Foster did this in intake. She did not assess the patient. You're not going to say I did not go and see the patient in lockdown. You're never going to say that I'm even good at, and I'm not bragging, I try to, let me just say that, because I don't want nothing to come to bite me. Let me just say, I try to pick up on the inmates going in for sentences because that's when something happened. You have inmates trying to jump off balcony and do it because it becomes real when it's sentenced. Working in the prison system, what you need to look for, your assessment skill. You should be able to look down the hall. They say a patient is coming and the patient say he has chest pain. You should be able to look at him walking towards you to clinic and say, yes, this patient is something wrong. We need to rush more. Get ready to go. Here we go. Let's go. If you have a patient that constantly use the system, he's having seizure. Don't matter. He might have 1,000 seizure in one night. You're going to have to go to the pod every minute. Every time he has a seizure. Cover your back, basically. Don't depend on the officer saying, he had a seizure and you know it's fake. I'll cover for you. No. When it all boils down, they're going to say, Miss Foster did not come to assess. The one time you decide not to come because I'm so sick of this patient every minute. He just want to come to medical. He's not having a seizure. That one time is when something's going to happen. So intake, you have to be firm in your decision. You're not going to take a patient that comes in that looks like. There are times when you can make a decision and say, oh, I think he's okay. You know, you take his vital signs. They may call you, you take the vital signs. They call me a lot there because sometimes the officers comes in and they want you to do a blood work right away. And you do it, draw the blood. I don't have a problem with that. But I think that's when it's a DUI. I don't really know anything about what the officer work entail. I'm just talking about my duty and what I see. So those are the things, the do's and don'ts. So make sure for your safety. And when you do refuse and you send the patient out, make sure you have that document somewhere. Because maybe the company that you work for, most of the prison system, the medical department is a private company. So you want to document what exactly happened, because I'm pretty sure the officer, the sergeant, the warden gonna hear about it in the morning, and they probably have a long note of Miss Foster did not accept the patient because, and so you go back to you go back to your desk and you write that note and you keep a copy and you have a copy for whoever in your company that needs it, just to cover yourself, nurses. It's a sticky situation, but you get through it. And I think that's why I said, once you work in prison or any jail system, your critical skills, I should say, it will kick in when you get to med surg, when you go to ICU, when you go to any other facility. Now, what I find that, like, when you go on interview, some people, they're stuck on, oh, you just did correction. They don't see the bigger picture. So, but you have to educate them what you did, how you went in an emergency to the pod when somebody was having a seizure, and when they asking you what things and how do you deal with it. Make sure you educate them, because you have great skills from working in the prison, because every day is an adventure. So I don't want you to think that. Let me just say this before it get out of hand. The officers, they're doing their job. I'm talking about the correctional officers. I don't know about the people on the street because I don't work on the street with them. They're doing their job. Sometimes they may slip, say, forget to tell us as the nurse. And then we get a call that this patient can't wake up. It's time to wake up. They wake up early in the morning. This patient can't wake up. Well, how did he get? He didn't come to medical. Sometimes they come in so late and it's change of shift. The officer might just send him to after he screened him, just send him to the pod. Not necessarily into population. It's another sector that they hold them maybe for 72 hours or 48 hours until their nurse see them, that they screen them for TB and lab work and medical, because we didn't get to it the night before. And so when the nurse come in, she'll do that. And based on the result, they'll get to go in population. But this person didn't make it because he couldn't wake up. So they doing their job. I'm not knocking them, but as a nurse, you have to make these decisions, and it's sometimes it's a hard decision. It take a while. I did not learn this right away. I was like scary and mild. Whatever decision you make, you will get flack from the officers. You might get flack from the police officers. You might even get flack from your coworker. But stand your ground. Your role as a nurse in the prison system is to do your job and do it right and be safe. Nurses who are, in the middle of stuff and you get busy and you don't remember you're doing meds and they call you to intake because you're in the meds because, they're short in prison too, So you're in the middle of meds and you shut the window down and you run, you put the pills in your pocket. Never you put the pills in the pockets. Don't put any medication. If you pre-pour and you put it in your pocket or you just put it, I'm going to assume that you're going to pass it to somebody. Why would you put it in your pocket? So be careful. Be very careful. They may get upset with you. Why did you send? It's more work. You know why it's more work? Because the officer has to take him. Not the correctional officer. The police officer has to take him to the hospital, and maybe it's to change the shift. They're going home, and now they got to sit at the hospital with the patient. So that can let them get a little irritated with you. But you just do what you have to do to save your license. That's all I can tell you. And, just stand firm. They'll respect you in the end. Believe it or not, it get easier as you go on. They know not to pull that stuff on you, and they'll respect you. Miss Foster, what you think about this? They'll be upset in the beginning, but each time they'll learn you. And that's with anything. So I just wanted to come out here and let you know. I just had a feeling that I need to talk about this.